2 in the afternoon. A frozen beet field in eastern France. The snow is grey with smoke. A tank destroyer burns in front of him, fuel cooking off in black gouts, and the heat of it warps the freezing air. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy climbs up onto the burning machine, takes hold of the .50 caliber gun on its turret, and turns it on the German soldiers walking toward him through the snow. He is 19 years old. Minutes earlier, 6 German tanks and roughly 250 infantry had come out of the village toward his position. His company was down to a handful of able men, exhausted, dug into a tree line with no reinforcements coming. Murphy did the math in a second. He ordered every man back into the woods, and he stayed. If lesser-known history told with respect is what you came for, subscribe, because the boy on that burning tank is the part of the story almost no one tells. He was the most decorated American soldier of the entire war, and 2 years before this field, the United States military had looked at Audie Murphy and decided he was too small to be worth taking. He was born on a cotton farm in Hunt County, Texas, one of 12 children in a sharecropper's family that never had enough. His father drifted away. His mother died when he was a teenager. To keep his younger brothers and sisters fed, Audie hunted that a cartridge cost money the family did not have. He learned menting you did not waste. A miss meant an empty supper table. By the time he was grown, he could put a bullet where he looked, every time. He did not yet know what that would be worth. When the country went to war after Pearl Harbor, he tried to enlist, and the country said no. The Marines turned him down. The paratroopers turned him down. He stood about 5 feet 5 inches and weighed barely over 110 pounds, and to the recruiters he looked like a child who would not survive a pack march. His older sister signed a paper adding a year to his age, and the army, hungry for men, finally took the underweight farm boy nobody else wanted. What the recruiters could not see on a scale, the war found out fast. Murphy went into combat with Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, and he kept surviving when bigger men did not. North Africa, Sicily, the beaches and mountains of Italy, including the long agony of Anzio, southern France. He spent close to 400 days at the front and rose from private to lieutenant on the strength of what he did under fire, collecting medals for valor along the way. By January 1945, the boy too small to enlist was commanding what was left of his company. The place was called the Colmar Pocket, the last patch of French soil the German army still held, and the cold there was its own enemy. Murphy's company held a vital road in a thin tree line near Holtzwihr. On the German side, the 2nd Mountain Division had one job that afternoon. Take that road, break the depleted Americans they could see were barely holding, and reopen the way out of the pocket. At 2 o'clock, behind a wall of artillery, 6 tanks and 250 men in white snowsuits started across the empty open field toward a position they expected to overrun in minutes. 2 American M10 tank destroyers were dug in to help. Their guns hit the German armor and the shells skidded off without stopping it. Within minutes, one M10 took a direct hit from an 88 and began to burn, its crew scrambling clear into the snow. The other backed into a ditch and was out of the fight. Murphy fired his carbine until it was empty, watching the white-suited infantry come on across the field. By every rule of war, this was the moment to run. His men were already in the trees behind him. The road was about to be lost. Instead, Murphy walked to the burning tank destroyer and climbed on. The steel was hot enough to feel through his boots, the fire chewing somewhere below the deck, and any second the flames could reach the ammunition and the fuel and end him in a flash. He did not get down. He swung the heavy .50 caliber gun toward the field and opened fire. The smell of cordite and burning diesel, the cold biting his hands, the hammering of the gun, the white shapes in the snow folding as the rounds reached them. For the men watching from the tree line, their lieutenant was standing on a bonfire, alone, daring the German army to come and take the road. The whole time, he kept the field telephone pressed to his ear, calling artillery down closer and closer to his own position. At one point, the fire direction officer asked him how near the Germans had gotten. As the story is told, Murphy answered, quote, "Just hold the phone," and aisled in his leg and did not mention it. He was bleeding from a wound in his leg and did not mention it. Shells from his own guns burst among the advancing infantry. The attack that was supposed to take minutes began to come apart in the snow. He held that burning machine for close to an hour. When the .50 finally ran dry and the smoke from his own artillery gave him cover, Murphy climbed down and limped back toward the woods and his men. He had gone only a short distance when the tank destroyer's turret blew apart behind him, thrown into the sky by the fire that had been under his feet the entire time. He should not have been alive to hear it. The field in front of the tree line was no longer full of men walking toward the... Most men would have let that be enough. Murphy was wounded, his ears ringing, his company still dangerously thin. Instead, he refused to be evacuated, pulled his men together, and led them back out of the tree line in a counterattack, driving the surviving Germans off the ground they had come to take. Company B held the road that night in the freezing dark. The next day, The village of Holtzwihr fell, and with it cracked the last German foothold in the Colmar Pocket. One 19-year-old, on a burning tank, had bought the time that saved a company and held a road the enemy needed. On June 2, 1945, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch pinned the Medal of Honor on him for that afternoon. By the war's end, Audie Murphy held every award for valor the United States Army could give, some of them more than once, along with honors from France and Belgium. He had fought in 9 campaigns across roughly 400 days of combat and was credited with around 240 of the enemy killed, wounded, or captured. He was 20 years old, and he was the most decorated American soldier of the Second World War. He came home a hero and spent the rest of his life carrying the war inside him. He wrote it all down in a memoir called To Hell and Back, and later played himself in the film of it, but the nights were hard, and he was one of the first famous soldiers to speak openly about the wounds combat leaves that no one can see, asking the country to take better care of its returning men. Audie Murphy died young in 1971. He rests today at Arlington, where his simple government headstone is among the most visited graves in the cemetery. But forget the movie star and the medals for a moment and go back to the field. A 19-year-old who had been told he was too small to fight, standing alone on a burning tank in the snow, holding a road against an army because the men behind him were too few and too tired to hold it themselves. That is who he was before he was a legend. The recruiters measured him and saw a boy who was not big enough. The German army measured him across a snow-covered field and learned the same thing the recruiters had missed. Size was never what they should have been measuring. If your father, grandfather, uncle, anyone in your family served in Europe in any branch, leave their name and one thing about them in the comments. Not just a name. One thing they did or said, or that you remember. The men who held those frozen fields deserve to be remembered as people, not just numbers. Subscribe if you want the next story. There are more of them.